Okay, this is my rendition of the Ingle Farm story. And I feel like I'm only just telling the story. I still don't feel like I'm necessarily part of this. I guess I am a part of the story, but it started a long time before me. And I think that for me it's been interesting to look at the fact that Prospect Core was an inner city core for a number of years. It started in 1924. And life changed. Adelaide changed. For instance, in the 50s, early 60s, the Italian and Greek migrants came to Adelaide, and then by the 70s they were buying up in the inner city, and so all around Prospect was very much being bought out by Italians and Greeks, which is no problem. It's just that they came with a predetermined religious environment, so that they were either Orthodox or Catholic, and so Prospect found themselves becoming very insular. They didn't have a mission field, and my father was the officer when they bought this land, which is another interesting thing for me now that I'm ended up here. But I just pay tribute to the core that was existing in that place, to be able to say this was the mortgage belt. A lot of the kids that were growing up and getting married were moving out here. They said, well, why do we lose our kids? Why don't we just move together out here? And so this block was bought. There's a whole lot of history involved in that. This is actually part of the Ingle Farm, which belonged to Salvationists. The Rose from Norwood owned this farm, and we're on the tail end of it, which is a whole nother story. But I just felt that a DNA started to form when Prospect took that really bold stand to shift altogether as a congregation out here. And then when they came here, they were determined right from get-go to reach the community. And they did it right from day one, before day one in fact, because they started an outpost at the school up the road here, which we're now about to go back into again, which is really interesting with our Just Brass. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that has happened historically that has said what we want to do is meet the needs of the community. And they started with traditional stuff that they knew, like children's ministry stuff. They had hundreds of kids coming here, and lots of really good program. But the community also said, but you're the Salvation Army, and they knew that what the Salvation Army did was help the homeless and the poor. And so as an immediate response by the Corps, they decided to start what was really social service program. And they did it without funding initially. They got a house. They started with Corps folk, looking after some kids. And then in about 5 years after we actually moved here, we got our first SAP funding, and that was in 1983, and 83 I think it was, and that started what was a real problem for the Salvation Army, because we then were a corps that were doing social program, and in those days there was a social department, and the field department, and the field didn't have a clue what to do with social, and the social department felt that we were doing something that they didn't know what was going on. And so it was a real problem to them, and that got worse, I think, as time got on, as we got bigger. And it was interestingly, Barry Casey's time as the DSPS that I came on board, and the DC had made a decision that he was going to close the social services at Ingle Farm. And I said, that's such a shame, because we've been going for 10 years in this place, more than 10 years at that time, 15 years. 15 years doing good social work. Why should we just lose it all just because it doesn't fit? Why don't we try and make it fit? And so we then became an authentic social service network in Salvation Army terms, and I offered to juggle the two masters. And I think that from then we started to find that the division coped a little better with us, and we started to see that the work that we were doing here was starting to impact not just the community, because we were already well into doing that, but we were starting to be a good demonstration to many of an integrated ministry. And it's quite different to lots of other integrated ministries that are going on around our territory, but we now are the largest social service network, I think. I'm looking for Rhonda, but she's just left. But I'm pretty sure we're the largest network in this state. And I think the juggling act has no longer been as big a problem for anybody, really. And I think that we can say that we've pulled it off. One of the things, how is the time? I didn't take any notice of what time we start. 2 minutes. One of the things I wanted to just mention was the way that having a large network, because now we've got 94 staff, we've got a budget of about 8.5 million. We have opportunity to do a whole bunch of stuff in the community, and I think one of the exciting things for me over recent years is that while perhaps we're not a good model at mobilising the troops within, I think I look at 614 and some of those, and I'd love to be able to do that, but then we do it differently. We've got Rev, and I think that we're doing some good stuff there. But one of the things with our Communities for Children program is that we've started some ideas in the community that have then been adopted. So, for instance, when we started, we were wanting to find out what the needs of the community were, and we paid for a relief teacher in every primary school in our area. We've got 15 primary schools, and so we paid for a relief teacher in every primary school to allow the teacher, the class teacher of the reception class, to do one-on-one assessments on all their children for the AEDI, the Australian Early Childhood Index. And what the results of that were so impacting that it got all the schools in our area talking together, because they'd never done that before. They were even in different regions. And they started to find out what commonality was going on about the low socioeconomic status of so many of these children. And they started to work together to find out how to deal with that, to the point where it just changed the entire area and made such an impact that now the Education Department in South Australia has adopted it across the state every year. And that's just an example, I think, of the little things that we've done, and I could go on to give you a number of other stories where we've started something that seemed a good idea but has now been adopted by the state. And I think that we, as an organisation, feel like we're influencing our community just because we are respected, they like what we do, and they come to us and say, how do we go about this? And then they just say, that's had such an impact on this. We're doing it again. We're in some schools in the area, making some amazing changes. And in fact, we've lifted the Ingle Farm CEPA index by 8%. And and they acknowledge that it's our work that has done that. So I just want to say praise God for those that have gone before us, who have allowed their desire to reach the community or others to get started, and then we followed on. And I'm just so thrilled as I come to the end of my time that there's a whole bunch of younger ones that are taking over and doing it again. So.
As we redo the timetable, I'm thinking 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions. If that's okay with everyone. And Peter and Di will have you up next, if that's okay. So some questions? Yeah, John?
Yep. Was that all of the story, Alan, or have you got more to tell?
It's a 5-hour story, the Ingle Farm story, and I'm still learning. I've learned some new bits again today.
Alan, has anybody written it up? Somebody should. I mean, I think that every story of a corps that's reached a point where they really can impact the community, and I think the studies of the lifting of the sort of index in your community is a really important one. But I think, you know, you've started a huge ministry here with a congregation that was somewhere else but had a passion to be more relevant. So I think it'd be great to pull together a book called Relevant, which is about army programs and the history of them, because I think we've got too many defeat stories and negativity. Let's have some stories about, you know, pushing it and get, you know, even if you have to pay someone who is a professional writer to come in and write it up, that's not a wasted investment.
There's a writer sitting over there, I think. Where? Her, Jen Peterson writes.
Isn't David Collins a published author?
I could get Nielsen Munn in again. That's what I do, just to get my name on the book. But I actually think Eldridge is semi-retired now. I think he was actually sort of sniffing around for a bit of a job.
Mine always sounds like a government submission. You actually need someone who can tell a story.
You said something interesting about you haven't worked out how to deploy the troops from the Corps. Do you think because you run you got so many staff, people in the Corps might just think, oh, well, it's up to the experts type thing? Or what's the roadblock in deploying the troops to partner?
I think it's a number of things. I don't think it's altogether true. The Ingle Farm Corps doesn't have a single activity that doesn't reach the community and bring people in. Like our band and songsters are now band and singers because they're open groups. We've not had one Christmas choir that hasn't had people stay and become soldiers. You know, that every single thing, the Home League has, there isn't a group. We don't have a group. In fact, if we had one, I think we'd kill it if it couldn't. So it's not altogether true, but one of the things that I admire is duos, you know, because it just got allowed caught the imagination of the corps, where, you know, in 20 years I haven't pulled that one off, and I sort of wished I had, and that's for the next one.
You've pulled off so much more, Alan. Over 19 years. Incredible.
Do you reckon the Corps knows the story, Alan? The Corps. Okay.
We've told it many times.
Yeah.
Always be new people that...
It'll be better when someone else writes it. Honestly, it's funny. No, people are so funny. You know, it is true that prophets aren't sometimes accepted in their own land, and I think that to get somebody who has a natural skill to tell a story, to tell your story, the amazing impact might be within your congregation.
And is writing the story the only way of telling the story?
Well, yeah, could you do a CD or something, you know?
Or a television documentary, Grant Whitehead?
Or can we do it running Facebook stories? No, sorry. Shut him up now.
How's your sunbathing?
As a comment, Alan's a very humble guy, and I think he may have forgotten something. One way in which the Corps was really involved was a program called Making Memories, in which we had kids who were in Muggies predominantly. Was it all Muggies, Alan? Belendi as well. And our Corps folk, the idea behind Making Memories was a lot of the memories for these kids were terrible memories, to create some really good memories. And a group of Corps people took out their four-wheel drives and they went bush for a fair while, wasn't it? A couple of weeks, and took kids on that adventure with them, gave them a camera, but it was Corps family driven, that it was soldiers taking kids out, and that was transformative for our kids, and gave them that. So Alan's selling himself short a bit there.
And I'm sure this is accurate because Sam's dad told me this, that our centre is the biggest of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere.
Who's Sam's dad?
Major Haley. And he always tells the truth, doesn't he, Sam?
Not only is a prophet not accepted in his own family, sometimes in their own home.
Jim Naggs believes that we're the largest of our kind in the world.
Oh, well. Well, let's go with that. That sounds better. Front of the book. All right.
It's the largest in the universe. It's the biggest in the universe. No doubt about it.
You've got that recorded. There's so much more there. If you want to chat with Alan over coffee later, you can. And thank you so much, Alan, for your investment. And Ingle Farm have some big transitions ahead. And that DNA will continue to...
Sorry, is it true that you're leading a coffee-led recovery here, Dave? Is that right?
Yes. On that note, let's move to our next guests. Yeah, there's a mic up there.
Well, I think it's fitting that we went next because the story, Ingle Farm story, is a big part of my story. And actually, when I first moved to Australia from England, it was the Ingle Farm Corps that picked us up from the airport and housed us for 6 weeks until we got settled here. And now we're officers on the Bellarine Peninsula. It's a very exciting calling that Di and I are involved in. But I think it's more of a story than so much a calling. It's tapping into a story. And we're hearing throughout this whole weekend there's amazing stories. And God is telling an amazing story of salvation. And he invites us to be part of that story. And for us as officers, Di and I got appointed from training college to the Bellarine Peninsula, which on the next slide, as you'll see, it's right near Geelong. This is the Geelong region, that's the South Barwon region, and down here you have Torquay, then this is the Bellarine Peninsula. So we've got 13 towns on the Bellarine Peninsula, and God sent us to this part of the world and gave us the mandate of go and make disciples. And that was quite a scary thought for us. Go and make disciples. So we had a team of 8 people that were given to us by the Salvation Army, and they said, we're here to support you in starting the Corps. And one of them said, we want you to be like the Geelong Corps, and one of you we want you to be like the South Barwon Corps. And another guy said, actually, we want you to be like the Torquay Corps. And we actually said, well, the Pete and Di show's not really that great. I can play a cornet and hit the drums. We're not going to put on the Pete and Di show. We're going to make disciples. And they all said, well, that's not going to work. And they left. So we said, okay. And they went to those corps. So we helped the corps growth in that region. But what did that mean? What did it mean to make disciples? So for us, with our heritage, coming out of Ingle Farm, obviously we're very much influenced with being social as well as spiritual, being together. And that's all I'm going to say on that debate, because as far as I'm concerned, it is together, and that's all I'm going to say. But so for us, it was connecting into God's story. Simply for us is connecting into God's story. And he was telling a story that was so obvious he was telling the story that we had 10 confirmations that we were going to be planting, and not one of them came from the Salvation Army. God was making it very clear that he was telling the story, and it was our role to tap into that story. And his story was simply what Brendan was articulated this morning, is that we were to be those red doors in the community. We are to be people that build relationships with people in the community, being the representation of Jesus in our community. So that is being people of integrity, the fruit of the Spirit, being people who are patient, who are kind, who don't give up on other people. So we've been there for 5.5 years, and we just spent time. We're based here in Clifton Springs, but God kind of sent us out here to St Leonard's. Through the Red Shield appeal, we ended up at the St Leonard's Primary School. And so Di and I went to St Leonard's. We met a family there, and it wasn't safe to meet them in their home, so we met at the local school. Anyway, recently I discovered that the Salvation Army was on the Bellarine Peninsula from 1893 to 1899, and I'd never heard of the Bellarine Peninsula. But it's funny how God is telling the story, because the story back then started the same as it did with us, and we didn't know this story. 2 officers obediently went down to the St Leonard's in 1893 and found a family, sat around the campfire, started to build relationships, and the Corps on the Bellarine Peninsula started. Don't know why it closed in 1899, have no idea why it closed. But God was showing us that there's a story at work. He was showing us that we're tapping into his story, and that the Salvation Army context is a vital part of his story, because he speaks through context. So all we did was build relationships with people. And from that, programs appeared to emerge. And we have lots of different things that happen on the Bellarine Peninsula. It all looks like a lot of social programs, but it's actually people that we've connected with whose lives have found hope, trusting relationships. They've learnt to trust us. And in that trusting relationship, they've learnt to function as a human being, because they know that there's grace. They know that we're not going to quit on them. They know that they're not going to be judged. It is a safe place. So, and that's not a geographical location. It's wherever the follower of Jesus is. We take the presence and the message of Jesus with us into that community. So all these people that you see represented on here are people that we've connected with. And there are some programs. Just for Us is a program that's started through some guys from the South Barwon Corps, which has been excellent. But everything else is it appears to be a program. One of the biggest ones we have is Salvo Resto. It's a program, but it doesn't cost us anything. We were donated an EK Holden, and I'll just tell you this one story because we haven't got much time. But we were donated this EK Holden, and I just said, God, I don't know anything about cars. I'm absolutely useless. I couldn't even fix one, I can just about drive one. But we had this car, and for 8 months, I'm like, what do we do with this car? Standard Salvation Army practice has been, well, we better start a social program and restore the car. And I'm like, well, no, we don't have any money to do that. We're deficit funded already, so we're not gonna go down that way. So one day I had my eyes gauged across an article in the paper, and it said AutoPro had put on a car show, and I figured, my simple mind, maybe I should go and speak to AutoPro. And AutoPro said, actually, that's a great idea. We can't help you. Just go up the road to the car detailing place. There's a guy there that might be able to help you. So I went up to him and saw this guy, Dave, and Dave said, that's a great idea. Come back tomorrow. I'm a bit busy. Anyway, so I went back the next day, and I went back to AutoPro because the main manager wasn't there. I just wanted to catch up with him this day. And the main manager said, sorry, I can't help you. So if I'd gone on that day, that would have been the end of the story. But I didn't go on that day. I went the previous day and got led back up the road. So I went back up to see this other guy, Dave. And Dave said, you wouldn't believe this, but 10 minutes before you walked through the door yesterday, I was crying out to God. And you walked in the door. And he said, come with me. So I went with him, and he had this big sign on the back of his workshop saying, I'm not the bleep Salvation Army. If you need support, go and see them. He'd been burnt by helping others. And so I said, well, that's going to change, isn't it? Because you have to put up a proper sign. But anyway, his business has gone under, and we're still journeying with him. I saw him the other day. But he sent us across to the Smash Repairs. Now, the Smash Repairs, you may say, well, that's a logical choice to get a car restored. But I didn't want to go to the Smash Repairs because it didn't have a very good reputation. But God took us back to the Smash Repairs. And so that's where the story starts to become even more amazing, because we get there and the guys are like, yeah, we'll help you. So they donate 2 hours or 4 hours a week of their time. So they're helping the community. Help four or five of these guys restore this EK Holden. So it looks like a social program where these boys are starting, just involved in a program. This guy here, Cody, he's a junior soldier now. I was working with him at school, and I didn't know much about his family story, but he was coming to our youth group on a Friday night. And he and Ethan up here love cars. So they're like, when are we going to work on this car? So while we were waiting for this 8 months, every week they're like, when are we going to start this car? When are we going to start this car? So when we finally got them on board, we're starting this car, and they're like, great. So they got their friends to come as well. But I'm going to finish the story with this story of that. I got a message from Cody's mum about 6 months ago saying, you have no idea what you've done for my family. And I'm like, well, we haven't really done anything other than join a few dots. And she goes, no, you don't know, but my father and I didn't have a great relationship when he died, because he was at the Salvation Army in Colac, and he was always there. And I hated him. He was like married to the Salvation Army. So they didn't have a very good relationship. And she said, but I've seen what you've done with my son, and I'm just blown away by it. And then she goes, my father was also a panel beater. And now she's like, my father lives on in my son. He's doing the two things that my father loved. So you can see there's a powerful story of God is healing people who aren't even directly connected to the program, because they're getting caught up in the wonder of the story. And I just said back to her, well, I didn't know this stuff. Someone's telling the story. So for us, that's just one story of many, many stories of lives that are being transformed. These guys that last year got sent to the Australian Motoring Festival in Melbourne, and they got to spend the weekend with Shane Jacobson and the head of RACV. One afternoon it was pretty quiet, and I said, well, don't just stand here and look pretty. Why don't you go and gave them a challenge. Just go to the other side of the exhibition hall, and if you can get someone to come back here and show them through the program, I'll give you a prize. I'll buy you dinner. And I didn't think any of them would do it because they're all very cool. But they all wandered off and they came back. One guy, Cody, another Cody, he showed this guy around the car, gave a great presentation. We later discovered that he was the head of RACV for Victoria, and went, wow, this is a brilliant project. And all these boys have been put out of their comfort zone. But what's happened is, by us going dependent on community, by us being part of this story that God is telling, God gets all the glory for it. People are stepping up, partnering in the mission with us, and lives are changing. And we call the project Salvo Resto simply because it's salvation and restoration is what we're about. So relationships are being restored. Not only is the car being restored, the reputation of the smash repairers is being restored. Their connection to wider people. Actually, on that same weekend, the Sunday morning of the Australian Motoring Festival, I was with the head of Mobile Australia. I didn't know. And he was telling me how crap his life was and how horrible his life was. And I was able to pray with him in this auditorium. And just so happened, in the tradition of the Salvation Army, there was a couple of local performers just walking around the exhibition hall, one on sax and one on tuba, and they started playing Just a Closer Walk with Thee at that very moment as we were just about to pray. And I'm just like, this is an amazing story. It's not something I've made up. It's something that God has invited me to be part of. And so for us on the Bellarmine Peninsula, it might look like it's something that we have done, but all we've done is be obedient, listen to God and do what he says. And in the process of being obedient and letting go of our agenda, God gets all the glory. And there's a wonder to it, like what you read in the New Testament. There's a lot of wonder and awe associated with it. So that's just a small part of our journey, but that's it.
Thanks, Peter and Di. And I've met some of the people these guys have journeyed with, and they're in there for the long haul, and you're building the kingdom of God. There's no doubt about that, and it's very exciting what you're doing. And it's a new model in lots of ways for the Salvation Army. So we encourage you and cheer you guys on too. Questions for Peter and Di?
Tell us about this new model that you're using in the Salvation Army.
It's an ancient model, actually. It's actually not a model at all. It's a wonder that God has been involved in since the beginning of time, and that he's telling this story.
Tell us really what
Yeah.
Hey, Di, tell us about this model.
People, yeah, it's like that whole priesthood of all believers, pretty much, is that we just jokingly say that actually we've been commissioned for nearly, 6 years or something, and we haven't preached one sermon yet. So when we gather and we have our gatherings together, we sit and we actually have open dialogue with our people. So people they try to put us into like house church or organic church or whatever. We probably don't try to label us as that, but it literally is just a missional community that is actually really realising that, the church is in a crisis, and I think it's actually, I'm probably marginal in this, but I actually think it's a really good place for us to be, because we actually have to look at ourselves and go, are we relevant? What are we here for? And there's lots of people out there who want to dialogue with us, so let's do that. And so the whole reason of our gatherings is actually pretty much one of the things for us is that pretty much our whole time we've been the only Christians there. Like the others have all come to faith, so they've all been really small little seedlings. So we have been the only real mature Christians there, which has been great. But I mean that is a challenge in itself as well, But that's good for us. So when we have our gatherings, it literally is to dialogue with these people. What does it mean to have faith? Who is Jesus? People don't even know who Jesus is. And it literally is the biggest challenge for us when we first got there was actually having to go back to literally feeling like we were in Sunday school again, just even talking about basic, what is prayer? Why do we read the Bible? Who is even, just stuff like that. So it's literally going back to grassroots, which is great, good stuff. I love it.
Is it a model that is best suited to the embryonic church? In 15 years' time, will you still use this model, or will you be adaptable?
I think one of the things when we first got there, and this is like any appointment, headquarters comes down and said, give us your 5-year plan and this business structure and, your set achievement goals and things like that. And we didn't really know. We just had been given this vision of how we needed to go and do it. But to quickly answer your question, we don't know what God is going to do. We are just going to go with what, every day pretty much it is literally for us, just like a stepping out in faith of where God is. And we are literally falling through doors that He is opening for us. And 5 years ago, to have envisaged that we would be in the place and have seen the lives transformed in the ways that they have, and that we'd be doing ministries that we would never think of having done, and we are totally unequipped, to be doing the ministries that we're doing. We can only say God has done this, and He has equipped us for the task, but more so we've actually empowered others to do the work that God has called Him for. But but we were talking about this morning, even we had to get to a place where I spoke to a spiritual director of mine, and she said, Di, what happens if your core fails? What if when you leave, everyone leaves? What if the Salvation Army ceases to exist on the Bellarine Peninsula when you leave? We have to believe also that God does have seasons for places, and that's something we have to come into a realisation for ourselves, that there are places that are seasonal. That doesn't mean to say we aren't. And right now, we've got such a great team around us who, when we first came, weren't even Christians. So we're preparing them for our departure, and we know that they will keep the flag flying for us when we leave. But, yeah.
I was going to say, though, as far as the model goes, I would never change the way I operate, because it's not so much a model. You're humanising and empowering a human being. So the idea of disciple making is being a person that humanises someone, being a person that empowers someone and taps them into the story of God. And as they are in that story of God, they are then empowered to go and do what God is calling them to do. So that can work in any context. If we are sent to an established core, traditionally this way of disciple making in an established setting is that the people within an established setting have not necessarily been accustomed to the culture of having to go and do something. As John said this morning, in the last 30 years it's been more about just come and sit. So for us in an existing congregation, it would be working with those who we discover who are open to this idea of going on this journey and empowering them and supporting them to do whatever it is God is calling them to do. So it could be, if we were sent here, there might be one person in this community that's empowered to go and start working with another local community, or just start connecting with a family nearby. And as that family starts to connect into the story of God, they're experiencing healing, they're experiencing justice, dignity, they're experiencing that reality. As they change, that has a chain reaction to the people that know them. So it's kind of allowing that process to happen. And it may not happen depending on whether they respond. So it's basically finding that person of peace. The model is what is seen in the life of Jesus, but is articulated in Luke 10.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And again, if you want to know more, have a chat with Peter and Di, and thank you for sharing. Kate and Jen, who would like to speak?
Yes. Oh, hi. You can come out here too, Kate. You're speaking next. So we are a little unsure as to what you want us to say. So I'm just going to tell 3 stories, and 2 are from when we were at Reservoir. Kate and I are not married, by the way. But we do a lot of ministry together. We both have spouses that are not each other, and we have 7 children between us. 4, 3. Anyway, it's not relevant. I think, are people wondering if we're married? Anyway, we worked at Reservoir. We were officers at Reservoir and helped plant that community. And now Kate has been at Frankston North for almost 5 years. Wow. And I just sort of secretly joined her this year. Anyway, so 2 stories from Reservoir and 1 from Frankston North. When I was at Reservoir, I was working with the children, small children, primary school children, and I had a very good relationship with the primary school principal. So I'd go and meet with her every week, and it was very unofficial, very informal, but I would say to her, all right, which children do you need me to work with? And she'd say, well, you know what, this kid, maybe go check them out. And so I'd get their address secretly, and I would go and do a home visit spontaneously to this family, and I'd connect in with them and try and support the young person as much as I was able to. And one day she gave me a new name of a child, and she said, look, I don't know what you're going to do with this kid. She's really messed up. Just do what you can. I don't expect anything. Just do what you can. If she can just not beat kids up every day, that would be wonderful. It's pretty much the only outcome they wanted. And so I started working with her, and she was very angry. Her mum wasn't on the scene, and her dad was in and out of jail her whole life, and every time he went into jail, she got left with whoever he happened to be living with at the time. And they were so scared of him that they could never contact the department to let them know that this little girl was now in their care, because they were scared that he would, when he got out, would be very angry. So I started working with this girl, and I think people sometimes think that I know what I'm doing, but I really don't. And so I just said, well, girl, you can just hang out with me and do what I need to do. I was very busy. I was also studying at the time, so when I needed to hand in an assignment, she would come with me to hand in an assignment. And when I needed to make dinner for Boys Squad, she would come to my house and make dinner for Boys Squad. She just did what I did. She was my shadow, because that's all I had time for. And I would just hope that she would get something out of it. Anyway, this one time, she made dinner with me, made spaghetti bolognese for Boys Squad. Some of you may have heard this story. I think Kath, I've told this story before. Anyway, and it was the first time she'd really made dinner ever. And it was the most amazing. I could see as we were doing it, I was like, oh, this is meaningful for you. You're really enjoying this. You are learning how to cook spaghetti bolognese, and you've never had an adult with you do this, and this is amazing. And it was in my kitchen, in my home, and you could just see she was just so proud. I put the spaghetti and the sauce in a container, and obviously the hot sauce was the steam, popped the lid off. It was in the boot of the car. We drove to Boys Squad. I opened the boot of the car, and this spaghetti sauce that she was so proud of had just spilt all in the boot of my kind of dirty car. Like, I don't have a clean car, ever. And so spaghetti sauce. Now, she hadn't seen. And she was so proud of this spaghetti sauce, so I just scooped it up with the lid, scooped it back into the container, closed the container, brought it into Boys Squad, and just said to the leaders, don't eat it. But just, she was so proud. She's like, boys, I made dinner for you. And so that was amazing. Anyway, so those are the sorts of things that I did to help transform lives. I did this for about, I don't know, how many years with this young person. And one day, her dad called her while she was in my car, and he said something along the lines of, sorry, but I'm in jail again, and I'm going to go away for a long time this time. And the thing is, with this girl, she had always been told by people, I don't know why teachers would ever say this and other adults, but the apple never falls far from the tree. And she used to say to me, what does that mean? What does the apple doesn't fall? What does that mean? Oh, well, sometimes people think that you're going to grow up like your dad. It's their way of saying that, you're going to be trouble. And it's not a very nice thing to say, but that's what they're trying to say to you. And I said, but sometimes the apple tree grows on top of a hill. So when the apple falls, it rolls down the hill and it ends up very far from the tree. So it's okay. And so we used to sort of talk about this, the apple falls far from the tree. I roll. And anyway, so she got this phone call and she was in my car. And she was like, yeah, Dad, that's okay. I'll come and visit you. Jem will bring me. Don't worry. Anyway, bye. She put the phone on the ground of the car and she just stomped it and just broke that phone. And she was so emotional and so angry. And then she just rocked with her hands in her head in her hands and saying, "The apple falls far from the tree, the apple falls far from the tree." And she was so upset. And I think that was the turning point for her. She kind of broke that day. She was kind of broken. And I think the thing that I've learnt about ministry is that I've journeyed with a lot of kids and done some pretty intense things. And yes, you have some victories socially. Some of them turn out okay, and some of them don't. But if I've learnt one thing from ministry, it's that my role is to be there, to be cried on, to, for when their world falls apart, that they have someone to journey with them through that. And now this young person is 22 and she doesn't have any kids, and she's in a long-term relationship and she's a hairdressing apprentice. And I think, wow, how on earth did you make it through? I don't have any idea. But she made it. And it's not to say that that's victory and that somebody who ended up in jail is not victory, that somehow our investment in that person wasn't worth it and our investment in her was, but all that to say, it's just that the investment was so valuable. She knew, if nothing else, that there was at least one person in the world who was there for her, and that was tough. I don't know how long I've spoken for, but that's only one story. I'll just quickly, sorry, don't clap. I'll just quickly tell one more story just because it's now current. So that was a long time ago. And now this young person that I'm working with now, she's 15 and she has a baby boy the same age as my son, 11 months. And I met her and then sort of just started connecting in because we had kids the same age, and she's 15 and she probably needed it. But she's kind of an angry young person. And so I thought, again, I don't know what I'm doing with these people. I'm actually a little bit qualified to do this stuff, but I have no idea how you're supposed to help people who are as broken and damaged as they are. I don't know that there's any solution. So I do what I always do, come to my house for dinner. And she started coming to my house for dinner. And I remember a few weeks ago, our sons had a bath together, and then I was changing her son on my change table in my child's nursery. And she was like, the nappies, everything's there. Like, you've got your clothes and your nappies and your wipes, it's all there. I'm like, this is called a change table, and this is how it works. And she's like, that makes so much sense. And I realised that she doesn't actually have a lot of experience, of course, raising a child, because she's never done that, and none of her friends are doing it, and she doesn't actually know how to do all those really practical things that my mum taught and my sisters taught me. Anyway, so when she comes to my house and we go through the garage door into the family room, and my two older kids who are 5 and 3 see her, they get so excited and they yell her name and they run towards her and give her this huge cuddle. And for her, this 15-year-old girl who pretty much feels like crap most of the time, and who probably doesn't have anyone who thinks she's any good at anything, feels awesome that she's in a home, she's been invited to dinner, she's got these 2 little kids who just think that she's the bee's knees, and she, for that moment in time, she just comes alive. And another few weeks ago, I took her to the zoo with her son and 2 of my kids. And I'm petrified of butterflies, really, really scared of them. I don't understand it. All winged creatures, really, but particularly butterflies. They creep me out. And my kids like to go into the butterfly enclosure, and I just can't go. I can't take them in there. But this one day I said to her, can you take my kids into the butterfly enclosure? And she's like, yeah, I don't care, I'll go in there. And I'm like, now my oldest son is a bit like me, so he might freak out. He thinks he likes butterflies, but I'm not sure he actually does. Can you take them in? Are you going to be okay? Yeah. She's 15, she's pretty confident. And so she takes them in, and I go over to the exit and look through the window and hope they're okay. And here is this 15-year-old taking my 2 kids, feeling so responsible for them, feeling so proud that I have asked her to do something, that I need her and I have relied on her. And so she's triumphantly walking into this butterfly enclosure. And as she comes out, she says, yeah, where's my son? Yeah, he freaked out a bit and I didn't really know what to do, so I just kicked him. I just kicked him through. Yeah, that's what I would have done. That's fine. That's fine. But again, to just say that for me, I don't know what it's like for everybody else, but for me, ministry is a process of befriending people genuinely letting them into your life, genuinely letting them know your hopes and fears, genuinely relying on them, not pretending to rely on them, making them feel proud, but actually relying on them, because that's what a relationship is. And it's messy, and it's heartbreaking, and it doesn't always work, and it's probably what every social worker tells you not to do. I know, because I was in that course for a while. For me, for ministry, and to help them understand who God is and what the kingdom of God is, for me, that's how I do ministry. That's how it makes sense. So here's Kath to tell you how you really do it.
I was going to read something out, but I'm not going to. I think we're out of time. But just, I guess, one of the biggest lessons for me over the last 12, 13 or so years is that people aren't projects, and they know if you love them or not. They know. And love, your love, God's love, is the only thing that will really transform a person's life. Ages ago, when was that youth conference in Adelaide? Double Impact or something? How long ago was that? 11 years ago. My co-worker at the time, Rick, who kind of was the brains behind Reservoir, we took a bunch of kids to Double Impact, and we were asked to do a little elective on, what we're doing at Reservoir with these kids, and so we'd all planned it out, but then all our kids rocked in and sat at the back. And so it was really confronting because, there was some strategy behind what we were doing. And the end goal was, we were helping kids stay in school and get their homework done and all that kind of stuff. But at the end, it was that the hope that they would come into faith. And they all sat along the back, and we kind of shared this story. And I looked at them near the end and I said, but the most important thing is that, so I'm really emotional today, is that we love you guys. And this tough guy, his name was Roy. You probably remember Roy, Brendan. And he just started crying. And he called out, I know that you love me. And without that, you can have all the strategy and all that stuff's important. But particularly for, I guess, our focus is always on young people who haven't been loved before. And that is what transforms someone. And so that being able to be that vessel, for God's love, and to open your life up to someone is really important, and what we hope to do.
Thanks, guys, for sharing. And I've seen these guys in action back in Resi. Find their partners. I feel so old now. Get married, have kids, keep getting whatever appointment they ever want to get. They're just amazing the way they rig the system. But they are both generally committed to loving all people, but particularly young people, and you've had massive influence in so many people's lives. Do we have questions for these guys?
I'm interested, I was thinking about this with Pete and Di as well. I'm interested about how we can lead volunteers to do the same thing. Because I think about that now, not in full-time ministry, and I want to do this. I want to do more of it, but I've got work and family, and I want to do it. And I'm interested if there's experience with that aren't where we aren't released to be able to do that full time.
I'll say something. Just very quickly. No, that's fine. That balance of program and lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's sometimes, there can be blurry lines there, and child safe, and it gets. I'm really trying to develop a kind of big brother, big sister type of thing, but a bit more, I guess, with the scope where a family could take on, the mentoring of a young person. And to be honest, that relationship would change a young person's life way more than, coming along to any other program. So that doesn't have to be within a program, but the idea of saying, hey, is there, one young person who's struggling and, just needs to come round to dinner one night a week, and just to see where that relationship might go. It's manageable, it's family orientated.
I'm effectively a volunteer because I work so little. So I would say, no, truly, most people would. Yeah. As in, I've got a 5, a 3-year-old and an 11-month-old, and actually currently on 7 weeks leave because I've got long service leave. But that's beside the point. When I'm on leave, I still hang out with people and still come to conference, because it's my life. The point of that, and to answer your question, is the majority of the kids are only available in the evenings as well, because they go to school or they go to something. And so I haven't been at Frankston very long, so I didn't know this young person that I'm now connected quite strongly with. And it took about a week to connect, because she already knew Kate and the others, and so it was pretty much just a matter of Kate saying, hey, my friend Jen has a baby the same age as you, and she's got some clothes for you, she's going to drop them round. Bang, that's it. And then from then I was like, hey, I've got these clothes for you. Hey, do you want to come to my house for dinner? Or do you want to come to the zoo with me? Or do you, 45,000 other opportunities to just hang out with her. And so I could be a staff member or a volunteer. It really doesn't matter. I see her once a week, basically, in the evening. So she doesn't know that I work, for Frankston or wherever. She just thinks I'm friends with Kate. So, that's all that to say. Volunteers are no different to us, really, in the sense that you only need, time-wise, you only really need an hour in the evening to connect in.
I was just going to say that personally, we were talking about this before, but I've really been challenged recently about the hospitality of God and whether we actually underestimate the importance of hospitality. And when we look at Jesus as our image of him who just sat with people just in really ordinary everyday situations and just really just sat with them, and they learnt from him and with them. And we just finished our bachelor, which is really great, and James, our youngest, is going to school next year. And one of the things I personally have been challenged to do is actually just to open our table up more, so that for those people, and we've got a lot of friends that are parents as well, and they see what we do, and they're like, oh, I don't know how you can do it. But they will be sharing their stories of how there's a kid from the primary school that keeps wanting to come over to their house, and I'm saying, you need to invest in these kids. You need to. You can't just have one family or one person that does it. We all need to. If you're how many kids these days have 2 parents that are with them? Do you know what I mean? Just be a good role model to these kids. Open your table. And this whole hospitality, it's really structured programs are great, but where people are really going to be transformed is when they're actually allowed to sit with us in our spaces, doing our everyday things like the dishes and interacting with our own kids and with our husbands or partners or whatever. that's how these kids are going to actually go, oh, what? My family does not do this. So this is an alternative model. And it's actually then you're really having those genuine discussions with these people. So I'm really being challenged to do more of that. You know, that hospitality is really essential to transformation.
Just one extra thing very quickly. I get the child safe thing. Like, I get that inviting people into your home, and there is some definite stuff that people should check with their core officer about. Do you know, like, I get that exists, but I also think, and the safety of my children, and I do think through all of that. I am very responsible and quite rigid around some things. But I also think that young people are incredibly respectful and step up when they're given an opportunity. So when you trust them with your home and with your own children, they're very responsible and they change. So this young person that I work with, her behaviour in my house is very, very different to her behaviour at youth group. I wouldn't invite the youth group version of her to my house, but she's not that person when she's in my home because she's trusted and she steps up. She doesn't want to fail. She wants the relationship as much as I do. So she honours that. And that won't work with all young people, but I reckon it would work with most. Yeah.
I was going to say, this is where you have to think outside the box as well. It's not just within the Salvation Army. This is where we can be raising up our whole communities to be doing this. Like, our school community is already opening their homes to kids to come over and play every day for play dates. So sometimes we have to go, like, look outside the Salvation Army and actually go, how are we going to raise up and mobilise our whole communities? And together we're going to help transform lives and help transform the community. And yes, they may be part of fall within, but in partnership, how do we mobilise our communities? And that's what it is, because it's already happening. And, you know, you're not going to have every parent doing child safe, but their kids are already coming over. So how do we encourage them to just keep sowing seeds into the lives of these others?
I think I need to be very careful what I say here. I could be thrown out by the SMO police. I think we need to be really careful that we don't let people who abuse children steal our joy. So I just think we need to be, one, careful about that. Two, we also need to be careful about child protection in the community. So it's a very difficult balance here. And I think some of the stuff that we're doing is so institutionalised, it won't help us identify a predator. You know, we've had experience in our own family of an abusive person, and they wouldn't be who you would expect. And that's the scary thing. So I think one of the things we're missing out a little bit, and it's something that Brendan's had a conversation with the police about, is recognising grooming behaviour. I think we do so much about limiting how people relate to each other, and it may not address the issue at all. Whereas if we can learn to recognise grooming behaviour and promote that sort of understanding in the community, you have an opportunity for broader community to still engage around hospitality and for kids to live normal lives and for people to put their arm around a kid occasionally and things like that. But so it's this balancing act of vigilance and common sense. And I think at the moment, when big organisations try to restructure something, they err on the side of overreaction, and I'm not sure that a bureaucratic response protects people from predators. So I think what I believe will happen in our organisation is this discussion will get more mature. But I do think it is about grooming, it is about unnatural behaviours, and you know, this might sound a bit patronising, I don't mean it to be, but I think women have got better detectors than men on this. Because women are more used to identifying creepy males. Not that all the abusers are males, I'm not saying that, but let's be really clear, the higher proportion of them are. And I think we just need to be listening to each other about those sorts of things. But I don't want our joy stolen. You know, I don't want to see communities where kids can't feel safe and loved and cared for because we're so over-defensive about child protection issues.
Thanks, Dave.